The air smelled of charcoal and freedom, that unmistakable summer tang of ribs sizzling and laughter spilling across the backyard. I stood on the edge of Marcus's family barbecue, clutching a red Solo cup, watching strangers become family under a Carolina blue sky. Then I saw him, Javier, leaning against an oak tree, his dark eyes catching mine like a spark in dry grass. I'm Khalil, 25, a graphic designer who'd rather sketch cityscapes than navigate small talk. Marcus, my best friend since college, had dragged me to his family's annual barbecue in Raleigh, promising good food and better vibes. I wasn't one for crowds, but his enthusiasm was infectious, and I'd been cooped up in my apartment too long, drowning in deadlines and doubt. So here I was, surrounded by his sprawling family, their voices a warm hum of Southern hospitality. But Javier, he wasn't family. Not yet. He was 27, a carpenter with hands that looked like they could carve stories from wood. His faded denim jacket hung loose on his frame, and his sharp jawline softened when he smiled. A smile that hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. Marcus had mentioned him in passing, a cousin's friend who just moved to town. But nothing prepared me for the way his gaze pinned me in place. I wasn't out, not really. My family back in Durham didn't know, and I'd kept my heart locked tight, safer that way. But Javier's eyes were a question I didn't know how to answer. Yo, Khalil, you good? Marcus's voice snapped me back. He was 26, broad-shouldered, with a grin that could disarm anyone. He handed me a plate piled with ribs and cornbread, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. Yeah, man? I lied, stealing another glance at Javier. He was talking to Marcus's sister, Lena, now, his laugh low and easy. I wanted to know what made him laugh like that. I wanted to know everything. The afternoon unfolded in a blur of music and chatter. Kids darted through the yard, chasing a soccer ball, while Marcus's mom, Ms. Deborah, presided over the grill like a queen. I tried to blend in, nodding at cousins and aunts whose names I couldn't keep straight. But my eyes kept finding Javier, when he tossed a kid into the air, when he grabbed a beer from the cooler, when he caught me staring and didn't look away. By the time the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of peach and gold, I was restless. I wandered to the edge of the yard, sketching absently in my notebook, a habit that grounded me when the world felt too loud. That's when Javier appeared, holding 2 beers, his stride confident but not cocky. Mind if I join you? His voice was warm, like honey over gravel. Up close, I noticed the faint scar above his left eyebrow, a story I wanted to hear. Sure, I said, my throat tight. He handed me a beer, our fingers brushing for a split second. My pulse spiked, and I prayed he didn't notice. You're the artist, right? He asked, nodding at my sketchbook. Marcus said you're good. I shrugged, heat creeping up my neck. I dabble. He smirked, leaning closer to peek at my half-finished drawing of the oak tree. That's more than dabbling, man. That's soul. Soul. The word hung between us, heavy and alive. We talked about his move from Austin, about my late-night sketching sessions, about the way Raleigh's skyline felt like a promise. His words were careful but bold, like he was testing the waters. I wanted to dive in, but fear kept me tethered to the shore. Then Marcus's uncle, Roland, appeared. He was in his 50s, a burly man with graying temples and eyes that saw too much. Khalil, right? He said, his voice low, almost secretive. Got a minute? I glanced at Javier, who raised an eyebrow but didn't follow. Roland led me to a quiet corner of the yard. Near a rosebush Ms. Deborah tended like a child. My stomach twisted. Something about his tone felt like a warning. Look, son, Roland began, his gaze steady but kind. I saw you and Javier. I know that look. I've lived it. My heart stopped. I opened my mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Roland raised a hand, silencing me gently. "I ain't here to judge," he said, "but you need to hear this. Javier's got a past, a rough one, and if you're gonna step into his world, you gotta be ready for what comes with it." I stared, my mind racing. What past? What was he talking about? The BBQ's noise faded, and all I could hear was the thud of my own heart. Roland's words weren't just a warning. They were a door, one I wasn't sure I was brave enough to open. Roland's words clung to me like smoke, impossible to shake. I stood by the rosebush, my beer growing warm in my hand, as the BBQ's laughter and music swirled around me. Javier was back by the oak tree, talking to Lena again, but his eyes flicked toward me, searching. I wanted to run to him, to ask what Roland meant, but my feet felt glued to the grass. I wasn't naive. I knew people carried baggage, hell, I had my own. Growing up black and queer in Durham wasn't exactly a fairy tale. My dad's sermons about righteous paths still echoed in my head, and I'd spent years dodging questions about girlfriends, building walls to keep my truth safe. But Javier? He was a stranger, a beautiful one, and Roland's warning made him feel like a puzzle with missing pieces. I forced myself to rejoin the crowd, pasting on a smile as Marcus dragged me into a game of spades with his cousins. The cards blurred in my hands, my mind replaying Roland's words. A rough past. Was it drugs? Jail? A broken heart? I stole glances at Javier, who was now helping Ms. Deborah at the grill. His movements easy, like he belonged. But did he? As the night deepened, the barbecue shifted gears. Fairy lights twinkled above the tables, and someone cranked up a playlist of old-school R&B. Couples swayed on the makeshift dance floor, and I felt a pang of envy at their ease. I was still nursing my beer when Javier found me again, his presence like a magnet. "You disappeared," he said, his voice teasing but soft. He stood closer than before, his shoulder brushing mine. "Thought you were gonna show me more of that sketchbook." I laughed, nervous. "It's just doodles." "Doodles don't make people feel like that," he said, nodding at my closed notebook. His eyes held mine, and for a moment, the world shrank to just us. I wanted to ask about Roland, about the rough past, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I flipped open my sketchbook, showing him a drawing of the Raleigh skyline I'd done last week. "Damn," he murmured, leaning in. His breath was warm against my cheek. "You see things most people miss." My heart thudded. "What do you see?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took my hand, gently, like he was afraid I'd pull away, and led me to the edge of the dance floor. "Dance with me," he said, not a question but a dare. I froze. The yard was full of Marcus's family, people who didn't know me, didn't know us. But Javier's hand was steady, his eyes unwavering. I let him pull me into the rhythm of the music, our bodies moving awkwardly at first, then finding a sync. His hand rested on my waist, and I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. "You're brave," he said softly, his lips close to my ear. "Me?" I scoffed. "You're the one who doesn't care who's watching." He chuckled, but there was a shadow in his eyes. "I care. I've learned to live with it." There it was again, that hint of something heavy, something hidden. I wanted to press, but the moment felt too fragile. We danced until the song ended, and when he stepped back, his hand lingered on mine. "Meet me by the oak tree later," he said. "I want to tell you something." My stomach flipped. Was this it? Was he going to explain Roland's warning? I nodded, unable to speak, and watched him slip back into the crowd. The rest of the night was a blur. More food, more laughter, more stolen glances. But Roland's words gnawed at me, and when I caught his eye across the yard, He gave me a look that said, "Be careful." By midnight, the barbecue was winding down. Marcus was tipsy, telling stories about our college days, while Ms. Deborah packed up leftovers. I slipped away to the oak tree, my heart pounding. Javier was already there, leaning against the trunk, the moonlight catching the scar above his eyebrow. "You came," he said, his voice softer than before. "You asked," I replied, trying to sound casual, but my hands were shaking. He took a deep breath, like he was steeling himself. "Khalil, there's something you need to know about me. Before whatever this is goes any further." My chest tightened. Roland's warning echoed in my mind, but so did Javier's touch, his laugh, the way he made me feel seen. I braced myself, not knowing if I was ready for the truth, but knowing I couldn't walk away. The oak tree loomed above us, its branches swaying in the cool night air. Javier's eyes were dark pools, reflecting the moonlight and something heavier. Regret, maybe, or fear. I stood a foot away, my hands stuffed in my pockets to hide their trembling, waiting for the truth Roland had hinted at. "I'm not good at this," Javier started, running a hand through his hair, "telling people who I am, what I've been through." He paused, glancing at the fading barbecue, where laughter still spilled from the yard. "But you make me want to try." My breath caught. I wanted to tell him he didn't owe me anything, that we could just keep dancing, keep pretending the world wasn't watching. But his expression told me this wasn't something he could hold back. "I grew up in Austin," he said, his voice low. "Rough neighborhood, rougher family. My dad he wasn't kind. When I was 16, I came out to him, told him I was gay." His jaw tightened, and I felt a pang in my chest. He didn't take it well, kicked me out that night. I lived on the streets for a while, bouncing between shelters and friends' couches. I stared, my mind reeling. I'd imagined a lot. Trouble with the law, maybe a bad breakup, but not this. "Javier," I whispered, but he shook his head, not done. "I got into some bad stuff," he continued. "Hung with the wrong crowd, did things I'm not proud of, stole to eat, fought to survive. But I got out, got clean, got a job, moved here for a fresh start. That was 3 years ago. I'm not that kid anymore." But he looked at me, raw and unguarded. "Some people don't forget. Like Roland." My heart sank. Roland's warning made sense now. His protectiveness, his caution. But it wasn't just about Javier's past. It was about me too. Roland had seen something in me, something I hadn't admitted to myself. I was falling hard, and I wasn't ready for the weight of it. "Why tell me this now?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "Because you're different," Javier said simply. "I saw it in your eyes today. You're scared, but you're real. And I don't want to start something with you without you knowing who I am." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to run, to retreat to the safety of my quiet life, my sketches, my secrets. But another part, the louder part, wanted to step closer, to bridge the gap between us. I took a shaky breath and reached for his hand. His fingers curled around mine, warm and solid. "I'm scared too," I admitted. I'm not out. Not to my family, not to anyone except Marcus. And even then, it's barely a whisper." Javier's eyes softened. "You don't have to be anything you're not ready for. But I'm here, Khalil. If you want me to be." The words hit like a wave, pulling me under. I wanted him to be God. I wanted it more than I'd ever wanted anything. But Roland's warning lingered, and so did my own fears. What would this mean? For me, for my family, for the life I'd carefully built? Before I could answer, Marcus's voice cut through the night. "Khalil, Javier, y'all hiding or what?" He stumbled toward us, grinning, oblivious to the weight of the moment. Javier dropped my hand, but his eyes didn't leave mine. Coming, I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. Marcus dragged us back to the yard, where the last of the guests were saying goodbyes. Ms. Deborah hugged me, pressing a Tupperware of leftovers into my hands. Roland watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. Javier and I didn't talk much after that. The moment by the oak tree felt like a dream, fragile and fleeting. But as I drove home, his words echoed in my head. I'm here, Khalil. If you want me to be. I didn't know what I wanted. Not yet. But I knew I couldn't unsee him, couldn't unfeel the way he'd cracked something open inside me. The next week was a blur of work and avoidance. I buried myself in deadlines, sketching until my hands cramped, trying to outrun the questions Javier had stirred up. But every night, I saw his face. His scar, his smile, the way he'd looked at me like I was worth the risk. I wanted to call him, but fear kept my phone untouched. Then Marcus texted, Yo, Javier's helping me fix my porch this weekend. Come through. My heart leapt, then sank. Another chance, another risk. I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew I couldn't stay away. Saturday morning found me at Marcus's house, a modest craftsman on the edge of Raleigh. The air was thick with sawdust and the promise of rain, and Javier was already there, hammering planks into the porch with a focus that made my chest ache. He wore a worn t-shirt, his arms flexing with each swing, and I caught myself staring before Marcus nudged me. Help or gawk, man, Marcus teased, tossing me a hammer. I laughed, but my eyes kept drifting to Javier. He hadn't pushed me to talk since the barbecue, but his presence was a constant pull, like gravity. We worked side by side, the rhythm of hammers and banter filling the morning. Javier's laugh was a spark, igniting something in me I'd buried deep. When Marcus stepped inside to grab water, Javier turned to me, wiping sweat from his brow. You been avoiding me? He asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. I fumbled with the hammer, my cheeks burning. No, just busy. He nodded like he didn't quite believe me but wasn't gonna push. Fair enough. But I meant what I said, Khalil. I'm here. I wanted to tell him everything. How my dad's voice still haunted me. How I'd spent years hiding. How his touch made me feel alive and terrified all at once. But the words stayed locked inside, and we went back to work, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. By noon, the porch was taking shape, and Marcus declared a break. We sat on the steps, sipping water, the air humming with cicadas. Javier pulled out his phone, showing me photos of his carpentry projects, tables, chairs, a bookshelf with intricate carvings. This is my art, he said, his voice proud but shy. Not like yours, but it's mine. It's beautiful, I said, meaning it. His work was raw, honest like him. I wanted to show him my sketches, to let him into my world, but Marcus came back, breaking the moment. That afternoon, as storm clouds gathered, we finished the porch. Javier and I stood back, admiring our work, when Roland pulled up in his truck. My stomach twisted. He hadn't said much at the barbecue after our talk, but his presence still felt like a warning. Looks good, boys, Roland said, climbing out. His eyes lingered on Javier, then me. Khalil, help me with something? I followed him to the truck, my heart pounding. He handed me a toolbox, but his voice was low, meant for me alone. I meant what I said at the barbecue. Javier's a good man, but he's been through hell. You sure you're ready for that? I bristled, defensive. Why do you assume I'm not? Roland sighed, his eyes softening. Because I've been where you are, son. In love, scared, hiding. It's a hard road, especially when you're carrying someone else's scars too. His words hit like a punch. In love. Was that what this was? I barely knew Javier, but the thought of him felt like a fire I couldn't put out. Roland clapped my shoulder, leaving me with the toolbox and a storm of questions. That night, Marcus invited us to a bar downtown. I almost said no, but Javier's text, "You coming?" tipped the scales. The bar was loud, packed with 20-somethings and neon lights. Javier was already there, leaning against the counter, his denim jacket catching the glow. He smiled when he saw me, and my resolve crumbled. We talked for hours, the noise fading as we swapped stories. He told me about his first carpentry job, about the mentor who gave him a chance. I told him about my sketches, about the cityscapes I drew to escape my dad's expectations. When he reached for my hand under the table, I didn't pull away. But the night wasn't perfect. A guy at the bar, drunk and loud, made a comment when he saw us. Something cruel, slurred, about types like us. Javier's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. I wanted to disappear, but he squeezed my hand, grounding me. "Let's get out of here," he said, and we left, walking through Raleigh's quiet streets. The rain had started, soft and steady, and we ducked under an awning. His eyes searched mine, and before I could think, he kissed me. Slow, deliberate, like he was claiming something we both needed. "I'm falling for you, Khalil," he said, his voice raw. "But I need to know you're in this." I wanted to say yes, to dive into the unknown. But Roland's words, the drunk's voice, my dad's sermons, they all swirled in my head, holding me back. "I want to be," I whispered. I need time." Javier nodded, his smile tinged with sadness. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait." The weeks after that kiss were a tightrope walk. I saw Javier when I could, coffee shops, late-night walks, stolen moments at Marcus's place. Each time, he chipped away at my walls, his laughter and quiet strength making it harder to stay guarded. But fear was a stubborn shadow. My dad called one Sunday, his voice warm but heavy with expectation, asking when I'd visit Durham. I dodged, as always, but his words lingered, a reminder of the life I'd built to keep him proud. Javier was patient, but I saw the questions in his eyes. He deserved more than half of me, but I didn't know how to give it. Roland's warning echoed too, Javier's past, his scars, the weight I'd carry if I let myself love him. I was drowning in what-ifs, sketching furiously to keep my thoughts at bay. One evening, Marcus invited us to a gallery opening downtown. My sketches were on display, a big deal for me, a chance to be seen. Javier came, his presence steadying me as strangers praised my work. He lingered by a sketch of the oak tree from the barbecue, his fingers tracing the lines. "This is us," he said softly, and my heart cracked open. After the gallery, we walked to a park, the city lights glittering around us. I told him about my dad, about the sermons, the shame I'd carried since I was a kid. He listened, his hand in mine, and when I finished, he pulled me close. "I don't want to push you," he said, "but I see you, Khalil, all of you, and I'm not going anywhere." Tears stung my eyes. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. "I'm trying," I said. "I want this, us, but it's hard." "I know," he said, his voice steady. "It's hard for me too, but we're worth it." That night, I made a choice. I called my dad and told him I was coming home for dinner, and I was bringing someone. The words felt like jumping off a cliff, but Javier's hand in mine was my parachute. When we arrived in Durham, my dad was polite but stiff, his eyes flickering between us. My mom was warmer, her hugs a quiet anchor. Dinner was tense, my dad's questions probing, but Javier was calm, his hand brushing mine under the table. Afterward, as we washed dishes, my dad pulled me aside. "You're my son," he said, his voice thick. I don't understand this, but I'm trying. Just be happy, Khalil. It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a start. I looked at Javier, laughing with my mom in the kitchen, and felt something shift. The fear was still there, but it was quieter now, drowned out by hope. Months later, we were back at Marcus's barbecue, the same backyard where it all began. The oak tree stood tall, fairy lights twinkling above. Javier and I danced, no longer hiding, our hands intertwined. Roland watched from a distance, a small smile on his face. He'd been right, Javier's past was heavy and so was mine. But together we carried it. Ms. Deborah called us over, handing us plates of ribs. "You boys look happy," she said, her eyes warm. Marcus grinned, slinging an arm around us both. The yard was alive with laughter, music, and the smell of summer. Javier leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. "Told you I'd wait," he whispered. I smiled, my heart full. Love wasn't easy, it was messy, scary, raw. But under that oak tree, with Javier's hand in mine, I knew it was worth every step. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living.